Look at that. Now there's a drop down. You can even create drop down with HTML. What can HTML not do? Huh? It does everything. Tags are the building blocks of HTML documents, as all HTML instructions are given through these tags. For each individual HTML component, there is usually an opening and closing tag with the text or content of that particular component being contained inside these two tags. In this lesson, we will have the first of our two lessons, which will introduce us to HTML tags. Let's recap. HTML is the language in which web pages are written in. An HTML document is made up of tags which mark up or define the different components that make up the document. Let's explore how these HTML tags are written. Tag syntax, or the way in which tags are written, comes in three forms. Let's first look at the first two and how they work together to form elements. Opening tags, which consist of angle brackets containing the name of the tag in between them, is the first form that tags take. Closing tags, which work together with their opening counterpart, consist of angle brackets with a / and the name of the tag in them. An HTML element is formed using an opening and closing tag, and specifically the corresponding closing tag with the content that the tag instruction is acting on being between the two tags. Now let's consider the third type of tag. Some HTML elements have no content, and as a result, they are defined using an empty tag. Empty tags do not have corresponding closing tags, but only use the opening tag. They can, however, be sort of closed for consistency's sake by putting a / at the end of the tag before the closing bracket. Now let's head over to our source code editor and have some fun with tags and see what tags can actually do in an HTML document and see what the browser does with our tag instructions. Alright, now we're at our source code editor. We're going to have some fun with some tags. Notepad++ is a source code editor. We spoke about this in a previous lesson, which I will reference in this video. You should see a suggestion for it just about now if you're watching this on YouTube. If you have not yet downloaded it, head over to that video tutorial so that you'll see how to download it. It should be towards the end of the tutorial where I speak about how you can go to the website where you can download it. Okay, so we're going to check out some tags so that we can actually see this concept of tags, see elements which are made of opening and closing tags, and then also see some empty elements which only have the opening tag or just the empty tag. So before we start, or rather before we can start with the tags, let's first, we could immediately start writing tags, but for practice sake, it's a good idea to first write out the structure which is found in every HTML document. So every time you write a web page or HTML document, you will always have these tags. By the way, these are also tags which define the overall or the general structure of a document. But we will not focus on these. I will not explain these for now, as we'll touch on the overall structure of a document at a later tutorial. So what we'll call this, let's give the title and say tags demo. All right, and then you'll notice already, in fact, even though I'm not going to explain it, you'll notice that with the exception of this tag, again, as I said, won't explain everything. We'll explain this tag when we explain this structure, the HTML document structure. With the exception of this tag, you'll notice that for each tag, for instance, this is HTML, there's a closing tag. That's head, there's a closing head tag. Title, there's a closing title tag. Body, there's a closing body tag. So even from writing the general structure or the common structure of every HTML document, already you see this concept of tags or an opening and a closing tag in action. So let's head over in here to this body element, which is made of the opening body tag and the closing body tag. Everything that is visible on a website or on a web page, when you go to a browser and you view a website, all of that is defined inside this body tag. Okay, won't spend much time on that for now. As I said, I have been saying this a number of times. We'll cover this at a later tutorial. So now tags. Okay, let's deal with tags that have content. Let's consider, for instance, the h1 tag. Now, h1 is a tag. Usually, good practice demands that in each document, there should always be just only one h1 tag. h1 is like the main heading. So we would say something like, let's say in h1, this is the main heading. And again, as you can see, there is an opening tag and there is a closing tag. I just now realized that I had not turned on my mouse tracker, so you couldn't quite see where I was clicking with the mouse. Now it should hopefully be on. Yeah, okay, so let's continue. So now we've just created our h1 element using the h1 opening tag and the h1 closing tag with the content of the element in between those two tags. Before we continue, let me just control and zoom in so that we can better see actually what's written here. Okay, so now we want to see what this h1 tag looks like in a browser. So as we've shown in our tutorial where we introduced Notepad++, we're going to save this document and say, maybe we'll just say tags. We're going to change this and save it as an HTML. So that's fine. So when we say tag, interesting. Notice how it formats that a bit. And by the way, Notepad++ has this cool feature whereby it's able to collapse tag. You see this head element, it's able to collapse it when it's written in this form. So let's say if we're like, okay, not interested in seeing the head, we just want to see the body, so you can do stuff like that. But anyways, I digress. So now we've just saved it. There is the file over there. So let's double click on it. But before I do that, I don't want for us to be confused by a lot of things. So I'm just going to close this. I had a lot of things, tabs opened. So let's do that. And there we go. This is the main heading. So let's go back and see what happens if now, for instance, sorry, I want to come over here. Let's say now we want to create another, we want to use h2, which is just one level below h1. Let's create an h2 element using the opening and the closing tag and the content in between. This is a secondary heading. Save that. Come over here and refresh. Would you look at that? As you can see, it's a heading, and the browser interprets that h1 and h2 differently. And since h1 is like a main heading, as you can see, it's a bit bigger. h2 is slightly smaller. And even if we did h3, I'm just going to copy this whole thing, just change those. h3, I'll just leave the text the same. Head over this side. I've saved, by the way, Control S, so that's why you don't see me having to go file save. Yeah, I mean, just basic stuff. So we come over here, we refresh. Notice how it's smaller. Okay, so enough of the h1 tags. What other sort of like elements can we create using tags? Let's see P. P is another quite common element that's used. P is the paragraph element. So this is the p tag, opening p tag, and the closing. Let me do that. Opening p tag, closing p tag, thus making a p element or a paragraph element. So let's say this is a paragraph element. Okay, dot dot dot. But usually you don't have one paragraph, so I'll just copy that. Then I'll say this is a second paragraph. Then I'll say this is a third paragraph that is slightly longer than the other two paragraphs and maybe slightly was an understatement. Huh? Understatement? Do you spell it as one word? I don't know. Whatever. Not an English major. Oops. Okay. Let's refresh. So there you see. That's our first paragraph, second paragraph, and our third paragraph. So the paragraph element is designed in such a way that it contains a space similar to H1, by the way. It contains a bit of space above it and a bit of space below it. So it's the same thing with paragraph elements. They are by design so that, because typically when you are writing and you're writing paragraphs, you want for there to be a bit of distinction between your separate paragraphs. So the HTML paragraphs follow the same rule. When the browser interprets the paragraph elements, by default it adds some space above and below a paragraph. Okay, what other element? There is an element called, for instance, a div element. A div element is basically it's like a division. It's used to and by the way, you notice how a number of times when you're writing HTML elements, it's usually good practice to have your opening tag, your closing tag, and then more especially if your content is not going to be text. In the case of text, it's sometimes fine to leave it like this, so in like the same line. But if it's not going to be text, for instance, there's going to be, let's say, other elements inside of here, it's good practice to separate them like this, and then in between those two tags you then do like one tab, and then you start writing. This allows you to quickly see that, for instance, okay, I see there's the opening body tag, there's the closing body tag, so I can immediately see that, okay, this is all of the content that is inside this opening body tag. So in like manner, the div tags, they are used to define some space. So they don't quite have any specific formatting that they do to the content of whatever content is inside of them. Their main reason is to simply say that, okay, in this div, whatever is going to be in here, I want to contain it here, or maybe there could be a bunch of elements that are going to come inside of here, and all of those elements I want to group them with this div space. So there are such elements. So if, for instance, inside this div I could once again have a paragraph. Say I am a paragraph inside a div. So without any styling, which by the way, that's another later topic, styling, we use CSS to style things, but without any styling on this div or any special attributes attached to this div, it will just define the space, but you won't really necessarily see anything visually. So if we go back to the browser, F5, as you can see, the fact that there is a div, it does not visually show, we don't visually see any difference. So let's go back, and what other elements can we work with? There's now let's get a little bit fancy. There is, for instance, an element known as the table element. If I go that, notice table element. If we come this, we won't see anything. Just refreshed, come back. Then the table element, you can say use a tr element. A tr element represents a row inside the table. Save, we come back, still nothing. And then inside the tr element, which is a row, you can then have td elements. So I will say column 1, then I will just copy this. Column 1, column 2, column 3. So there's a table element. Inside it, there's a tr element. And inside this tr element, there are 3 td elements. We will just copy this so that we can have a second row element, column element effectively. Let's save that and see what that does. Oh, would you look at that? Do you notice how in fact, let's rather do this so that we can see. We'll say row 1, column 1, row 1, column 2, row 1, column 3, because all of these, they belong to this first row element. Then the second one, we'll say row 2, column 1, row 2, column 2, row 3. What am I saying? These are all row 2s. I hope I'm not confusing you guys. And then, you know, why not? Might as well just add a third row element. Then we'll call these row 3, row 3, row 3. So for row 1, there's column 1, 2, 3. For row 2, there's column 1, 2, 3. For row 3, there's column 1, 2, 3. And when we save it, you notice how those are the elements which belong to row 1. Those are the elements which belong to row 2. Hey, what's happening? And those are the elements or columns which belong to row 3. Now, immediately off the bat, you can kind of like see that HTML kind of look plain. I'll just mention this in passing. It kind of looks a bit plain. And the main reason, this is primarily, or this is why you will then appreciate when we get to our later tutorials and start exploring CSS, which is used to style HTML, to, you know, to give it a bit of a flair or whatever you kids call things that are fashionable. So you can consider CSS as the fashion guru of the web page effectively. So let's continue. I'm just going to minimize the zoom a little bit. Let's do a few more elements. Let's deal with the ordered list. Yeah, let's do the ordered list and the unordered list. So there's an element called an ordered list element. And another thing that I'll mention is that you will notice that there are certain elements that are used in a specific context, or they are properly used in a specific context. You wouldn't go and use the tr element outside of a table. The rightful place for you to use a tr element is inside a table, and the rightful place to use a td element is inside a tr element in turn. There are other elements, for instance, the div element, which they don't really have as much of a restriction. You can pretty much use a div element anywhere. Same applies to the p element. You should be able to use it anywhere. Whereas some elements, as I've already mentioned, such as the tr and td element, they make sense only within a certain context, or when they are used within a specific parent element. And there's another term, parent. When you have a element that's within another element, you will say tr has a parent element, and the parent element for this tr element is the table element. And all of these elements have the body element as their parent. So ordered list element. Now inside the ordered list element, you would then have a li, or list item element. So let's just do this. I'll say item 1. I can imagine you can sort of like guess what the use of the ordered list element is. Let's go see. There you go, ordered list. So when you want to create a list of things that have an order, that is to say specifies 1, 2, 3, 4, you would use an ordered list element, and then for the actual items inside that ordered list, you would then use the li, or list item element. There's a corresponding unordered list element. So instead of ol, you would use ul. So let's try that. As you can see, unlike the ordered list where there is numbering, thus showing the order, unordered list does not use numbers. It's just like bullet points, almost as though we don't really care about an order. We're just giving you a list of things. Yeah. What else? What else can we play with? I think we can hold it there for now with the elements that have a start and end tag. What about elements that do not have that are empty elements? So to demonstrate an example of an empty element, we will create a paragraph. I will say this is a long paragraph that we would like to break in half. Let's go see what this paragraph would look like. That's what it would look like, but we could actually use the br element. By the way, we can write it like this, or we can write it including that / as we said earlier on, but we'll leave it in this form. So we could use that element. So let's save and come this side and see what that does. As you can see, it breaks that line at that point where we inserted the element. That's how the browser interprets the BR element. So the BR element, it's kind of like a instruction that does not have any content in it. It's just used to say, okay, break this text whenever I'm inserted. As a result, there is no need of a closing tag for this particular element. Hence, it's an empty element. So that would be an example of an empty element. So by the way, while we are here, there are such elements as B. Now I'm taking us back a little bit to the open close tag elements. There are such elements as B, and there are such elements as I. In other words, what I'm trying to show is that there's a number of elements that when they're interpreted by the browser, they carry out a variety of instructions. So if we come here, the B, you'll notice, in fact, I'm just going to zoom in on this page so that it's a little bit bigger. You notice that the B, the text that was surrounded by the B tags, in other words, that became the B element, or a B element. You notice that it's bold, and then the one that was surrounded by the I elements, it's italic. And then, for that matter, let's not go there for now. So yeah, this is how elements work. As you can see, each element does a specific thing. H1 is a heading element. A table is a table element with other elements inside it, defining the rows as well as the columns inside those rows. OL is it's an ordered list element, unordered list element, and there's a bunch of other elements. In fact, actually, just to show you, there's so much that you can do with HTML tags and the resulting elements. Let's just do another one. Check this out. If we say select and then we say option, so there's the select element which is made of this opening and closing select tag, and then in it we will put some option elements. We'll say option 1, now most of the elements that we've dealt with, they're primarily text based. They're primarily about showing you text. When I start dealing with this select element, you'll notice that it starts now it's the realm, or it falls under a category of elements that are used for getting input from the user as opposed to displaying input to the user. So far, we have been displaying content to the user, which is what you would typically find in a classical website. But the select element I've saved. Let's see if I refresh. Look at that. Now there's a drop down. You can even create drop down with HTML. What can HTML not do? Huh? It does everything. So yeah, we've explored a bit HTML tags. There's so much that you can do with HTML tags, and they form HTML elements, opening and closing tag with content inside. And in some cases, there are elements which, like the BR, which are just empty tags. They do not have a corresponding closing tag because they do not need it, since they do not have content. The element itself carries out a specific instruction, such as breaking up a sentence. Now, there are many tags out there, and clearly, or rather, I've definitely by no means have exhausted them. So I would strongly encourage you to read up on all the various types of tags that are there. You don't have to read up on all of them all at once. I mean, I haven't even covered all tags that are out there personally, even though that I've been doing web development for years now. So in order for you, when you'd like to check out all of the tags that are out there, you can come to this website, developer.mozilla.org. It's an authority of a website. It's an authority as far as HTML is concerned. So developer.mozilla.org/en-us/docs/web/html/element. I'll leave it down in the video description, as it says here. When you read here, this page lists all the HTML elements which are created using tags. So as you read, it'll tell you about all of the elements that are out there. Some of the elements are deprecated, or that is to say, they are no longer used in modern browsers. But this website will give you, it will specify every time. If, for instance, you click on a specific element, you want to study it, it'll tell you if that element is still relevant or it's not quite relevant anymore. So yeah, come over here and make sure that you give yourself some time to read some of the elements. And by the way, coming back to our tutorial, as I was doing this, do give yourself time and try to follow along and open up your Notepad++, or if you happen to not have yet downloaded Notepad++, you can still use Notepad, which should be there in your Windows PC. If you're using Mac, there's okay, fine. There's also a text editor. There should be a text editor in Mac. I'm not really a Mac person, You rich boys should be able to go to a university which will teach you these things. Anyways, I'm just kidding. So yeah, follow along and start playing with it. See what you can do. Come over here and maybe check out other elements. Try them out. Refresh your browser and see how how those elements are interpreted by the browser and take it from there. So in summary, what we'll say is that an HTML document is made up of HTML components or elements which are created using tags. An element consists of an opening and closing tag with content inside of two tags. So for instance, as we said, this is a column element. There's the opening tag, closing tag, and the content inside. Some elements consist of just the opening tag, as we saw in this example. With the BR tag, it did not have a corresponding closing tag. So this brings us to the end of our tutorial where we introduce each other to HTML tags, which are the building blocks of HTML elements. Next up, in our part 2 of HTML tag tutorials, we will be looking into tag attributes. Later.
You can watch other tutorials over here, and most importantly, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you don't miss out on tutorials as they come out. Have you subscribed? Are you done? Okay, cool.